The sound of twisting metal isn't something you hear. It hits your teeth first, a bad vibration traveling up through the steering column. It's sharp, unwelcome. Then the screech of metal colliding with metal, followed by the rush of air as something breaks. I didn't see the impact. I saw the aftermath. Two cars were welded together at an angle that didn't belong on any road. Steam rolled out of one car's crushed hood, a violent white plume that screamed of a broken radiator and heat fighting to escape. The air smelled like sweet coolant, mixed with something harsher, ozone. The kind of smell that makes you feel like something's been shattered, and the world is still breathing in the mess. I checked my clock. 8:40 a.m. My interview at Ross Logistics was at 9 o'clock. I looked at the rearview mirror. The suit, neatly pressed, hung in the garment bag behind the passenger seat. I wasn't going to make it. At Ross, punctuality wasn't just a courtesy, it was a metric. But this wasn't something I could ignore. I slammed my car in park, threw open the door, and ran. Only then did I move. The wreck was just up ahead. An SUV and a sedan, their fronts twisted together like a cruel puzzle. The other car had spun. Half off the road, its nose caved in like a fist had punched it. Steam billowed out of the engine, the kind of steam that said everything was broken. There was no time to hesitate. I sprinted toward the wreck. The woman was lying on the asphalt beside the driver's side, her knee drawn up against her chest. She wore a black blazer, her white blouse buttoned up high like she'd been dressed for a boardroom, not a ditch. Her dark hair was loose, disheveled from whatever neat style it had started with. She was holding her knee with both hands like she didn't trust it to stay attached. I crouched down in front of her, not wanting to startle her. "Hi," I said, offering her a soft smile. "I'm Stephen." She looked at me, sharp eyes, scanning, calculating. She wasn't hysterical, just steady. "Don't try to stand," she said, her voice tight. "I'm fine." Then her mouth tightened, like she'd lied, and immediately regretted it. I looked over to the other car. The driver was slumped over the wheel, but I could see his chest rise and fall, conscious at least. "I've got someone with him," I said. 911 is on the line." Her shoulders dropped just a fraction, not relief. Release, like she'd been holding herself together with nothing but sheer willpower. "Good," she said, like it was a simple fact. I moved slowly, keeping my hands visible. "Where do you hurt?" "My knee," she said, grimacing as she shifted slightly. "And my ankle." Her voice was controlled, but there was a slight hitch when she spoke. She was in pain, but trying not to show it. "I didn't hit my head," she added quickly. "No dizziness? No nausea?" I asked, checking her pupils. Her eyes were steady, no sign of concussion. But I wasn't letting my guard down. "Let's check anyway." I slid my fingers along the line of her collarbone, applying gentle pressure, moving down her ribs. No flinch. She was tough. When I touched her knee, she hissed through her teeth. It was already swelling under the skin. "That's the one," she said, but she hesitated. Pride battling with pain. "I'm going to stabilize it," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Then we wait for the ambulance." I pulled off my belt and using a strip of cloth from my trunk, I wrapped her ankle to limit the movement. She kept her eyes on my hands, studying every move I made. "Military?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Not the kind you think," I said, giving her a small smile, though I wasn't sure if it reached my eyes. She almost smiled back, a tiny curve of her lips, barely there. Behind us, the sound of another car blared its horn, and a door slammed. But I didn't look away from her. "The ambulance is coming," I said. "Keep breathing like that. Slow in through the nose, out through the mouth." She nodded, following the rhythm I had set. Not because she needed the coaching, but because she trusted it, and in that moment, I felt like I had earned her trust. I glanced at my watch. 8:47 a.m. My interview was slipping away, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. "Ross Logistics," I muttered, glancing at my watch one more time, the weight of the minutes hanging over me. She looked up at me then, her eyes shifting from my watch to the suit bag in my passenger seat. "You're going to Ross?" My breath caught. "How do you know?" She studied me for a moment, then said, That suit bag, and the way you keep checking the clock like it's a weapon." I froze for just a beat. A siren finally pierced the air in the distance, cutting through the tension, getting closer. "You'll still go," she said, her voice steady. "If you leave now, you'll keep your job prospects. If you stay, you'll keep your conscience." Her words landed heavy in the air between us. And yet, when she spoke again, her voice was quiet, almost like a whisper. "You stayed." The ambulance arrived then, screeching to a halt behind us. Paramedics flooded out with the kind of confidence that only comes with experience. They took over with brisk professionalism. I stepped back, giving them the cleanest handoff I could. One male driver, conscious, shoulder pain, possible concussion, instructed to stay still. One female, ankle injury, stabilized, knee swelling, no head impact. Vitals steady. They lifted her onto the stretcher, and as they passed me, she caught my wrist with 2 fingers. Light but deliberate. "Stephen," she said, tasting the name like she was deciding if it belonged to me. "How do I repay you?" I looked down at her hand on my skin. Warm, real. Not a plea, but a test. A question. "You don't," I said, but it didn't feel like a real answer. Her eyes held mine. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have time for," I said, stepping back, grabbing my suit bag from the car, and then I ran for my life. Conference C was at the end of a hallway that felt too quiet. The doors were heavy oak, the kind of doors that close behind you and decide if you'll come out the same. I exhaled, pushed them open, and stepped inside. Black leather chairs, a wall of glass. A sleek, minimalist conference room with too much space for the kind of feeling I had swirling in my stomach. And standing at the head of the table was Hector Vance, his back to me as he addressed the panel. He was mid-sentence, smiling as though he'd been waiting for my dramatic entrance. "Quote, ... As I was saying," he said smoothly, eyes flicking over to me, "reliability starts with something simple, time." Then he turned fully and saw me standing at the door. Hector's smile widened, not in the way you'd expect from someone who was pleased to see you. It was the kind of smile that smelled like predator. "Mr. Davis," he drawled, his voice low, enjoying the moment. "What a dramatic entrance." A couple of men in suits glanced at me and then away quickly, like even their association with me might stain them. I stood there, keeping my face neutral, jaw set. "Apologies for the delay," I said, not bothering to explain. "Of course," Hector said, stepping aside to gesture toward an empty chair. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Traffic, always an excuse." I set my portfolio down and sat. I didn't need mercy from him. I just needed the seat. Hector's eyes were still on me as I slid into the chair, but I didn't blink. If he wanted to make me sweat, he was going to have to work for it. The questions started immediately. Technical, operational, risk. I kept my answers clean, concise, no unnecessary fluff. But Hector, with his sickly sweet smile, kept trying to steer it toward humiliation. He leaned forward, tapping his pen, then casually asked, "Walk us through a crisis response. Imagine, say, a data breach or an accident. How do you prioritize?" I could feel the laughter ripple through the panel, that quiet, condescending laugh. I knew what they wanted, wanting me to stumble, wanting me to show weakness. I didn't give it to them. I answered anyway, precise, clean, no extra words. "You isolate first. Stop the bleed, preserve evidence, communicate with clarity, and you don't improvise accountability, you document it." I saw Hector's eyes narrow. He didn't like that answer. It didn't beg. It didn't show vulnerability. Behind him, the door opened, interrupting the moment. "Sorry I'm late," a woman's voice said, strong and sharp. The same voice I'd heard earlier on the side of the road. It cut through the air like it owned the room. I looked up. Liliana Ross. She walked in, every inch the CEO she was. Black blazer, white blouse, hair controlled but soft around her face. Her ankle, wrapped up, was hidden beneath her tailored pants. She moved with a grace that made it clear she was in pain, but she wasn't about to let it show. Every man in the room stood. Hector's smile turned into a tight-lipped, rehearsed thing. "Liliana, are you?" "I'm here," she cut him off. 2 words that were more command than anything else. Her gaze swept across the room, then slid over to me. Recognition sparked in her eyes, flickers of something more. Then something else followed. Calculation. She took the head seat, settling in like the room had been made for her and her alone. The other board members started speaking, but I wasn't paying attention anymore. Liliana was here, and she wasn't about to be ignored. "The drivers are alive," she said, calm but certain, looking around at the panel. "The ambulance has arrived. That's all you need." Hector hesitated, not used to being shut down so effortlessly. He wanted to say something, but Liliana wasn't letting him. She leaned forward slightly, eyes never leaving me. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You were on the road, weren't you?" I nodded. Yes. She didn't need to ask more. She already knew. But she still wanted to hear it from me. "And you still came?" Her voice softened only slightly. I met her gaze, and it felt like everything in the room had faded away. The answers were simple, but her eyes held something else. "Yes," I said, voice steady. Her eyes stayed on mine for a long beat. She wasn't looking for an answer. She was sizing me up. "Why?" Hector cut in, his tone dripping with too much eagerness. "Because he thinks it makes him noble," he said with a mocking edge. Liliana didn't even glance at him. Her focus was on me. I leaned forward just a fraction. "Because I couldn't leave two people on the side of the road. That's not something I can just walk away from." Hector's grin faltered, and Liliana's gaze softened, but only for a moment, barely noticeable. "Good," she said simply, then turned back to the rest of the room. "Ross Logistics moves pharmaceutical loads. If you can't handle blood and pressure, you don't belong here." Hector shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with how things were going. He tried to steer the conversation again. "We're not hiring paramedics," he scoffed, clearly trying to undermine the moment. "No," Liliana said, eyes never leaving me. "We're hiring someone who won't freeze when things go wrong." She turned to the panel, and in a voice that brooked no argument, she said, "I've heard enough." The room fell into silence, and Hector's smile was back in place, but now it looked more like a mask than anything genuine. Liliana looked at me one last time, her gaze steady, almost like she was making a decision without saying a word. "You start today," she said, her voice final. I didn't let the relief show, not yet. But something inside me loosened, a tension I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. Before I could respond, Hector cleared his throat. "Aren't you forgetting something?" Liliana didn't even look at him as she stood. "Back up. Fix your uniform," she said dryly, her eyes flicking to the stain on my cuff. "But keep your priorities." It wasn't warmth. It wasn't kindness. It was an acknowledgement. And somehow, it landed harder than praise. The first week told me exactly what kind of man Hector Vance was. Not with speeches or bravado. No. Hector was a man who didn't need to raise his voice. He made his presence felt through doors that didn't open, through the cold shoulder, through the unspoken power of exclusion. On Monday, my new badge worked for the lobby and my broom closet office near the server room. The next day, I followed the blue line to the executive floor for a meeting listed on my calendar. It wasn't a glamorous assignment, but it was my chance to make my mark. I swiped my badge at the glass door marked executive. The red light blinked. Denied. I swiped again. Red. I glanced at the security guard. Young. Nervous. He cleared his throat. Mr. Davis, your access isn't authorized for this level." "Who changed it?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. He glanced at his tablet. "It shows Mr. Vance approved the restriction." I nodded, one crisp motion. "Call Mr. Vance. Tell him I'm standing here." He hesitated, then dialed. A minute later, Hector appeared behind the glass door. He held a cup of coffee, his tie immaculate, his smile effortless, like he didn't even need to try. "Stephen," he said, as if my mere presence was an inconvenience. "Luke, my meeting invite." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I stared right back at him. Hector lifted his cup in a small salute, then spoke as though the moment was beneath him. "Oh, that's my mistake. I removed you. Executive meetings are sensitive. I'm head of corporate security." "I said you're probationary," he said, correcting himself slowly. His eyes glittered with a self-satisfied gleam. "And you were late to your interview. Try to remember your place." "My place?" My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "I'll remember," I said. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, blocked from entering, the door closed behind him with a quiet finality. He was making a move, forcing me to show my hand. I didn't let it bother me. Hector's games weren't mine to play. I went back down to my office, small as it was, the hum of the servers the only company I had. And that's where I thrived. Silence is where I do damage. I mapped Ross Logistics like it was a hostile territory. Entry points, credentials, cameras, data pathways, physical routes between loading docks and executive offices. I asked questions people didn't want to answer. I watched which names made their shoulders tighten. I learned quickly that the company's weak points weren't in the code. They were in the people. People Hector had trained to look away, to ignore the cracks, to let things slide. Liliana didn't interfere. She didn't rescue me. She didn't have to. She gave me one thing, and that was latitude. And in the business we were in, latitude was a rare kind of power. On Friday, when the week was starting to drag, Liliana appeared at my door. No speeches, no grand gestures. Just two people, standing in a cold room full of machines, agreeing without saying a word. When she turned to leave, I noticed something small on my desk. A coffee cup, black, no sugar. The way I drink it, I hadn't told anyone, not a soul. I picked it up and took a sip. Hot, fresh, just the way I liked it. I didn't look up, but in the reflection of the glass server rack, I saw her pause at the door, glancing back just once. She was checking to see if I understood, and I did. Later that day, Hector escalated. He didn't know any other way. It wasn't enough that he had tried to knock me down publicly. He needed to erase me, so he made sure my name was off calendar invites. My requests were reassigned to, quote, pending. My emails were delayed. Polite emails, questioning my scope. His little acts of sabotage were a game for him, a way to make me beg. But I didn't beg. I went straight to Liliana's office, bypassing the usual formalities, and dropped a folder on her desk. I could see her eyes flicker to the contents. The papers stacked neatly inside. She didn't ask what was in it. She just flipped it open. She trusted me to handle it. I spoke without hesitation, keeping my voice even. "Hector's pushing me to the edge, but this time he's doing it with my reputation. He's building a story, and he's using anything he can find. That includes you." Liliana didn't flinch, not even a little. "I know," she said, her voice low but steady. "We've been watching him, but I need you to do what you do best, Stephen." I didn't need to ask. I didn't need to know everything. But I knew exactly what she wanted. "Find the evidence," she said quietly, her gaze hardening. I nodded. I already had everything I needed, but the real work had only just begun. That night, as the office emptied, I mapped Hector's next move. He was coming for us, but he didn't know who he was messing with. The next day, the game changed. Hector's swing came on a Tuesday, and I knew it before it happened. I felt it in the air, a tension that was thick and heavy, like the calm before a storm. It started with my badge. It stopped working everywhere. Lobby? Red light. Elevator? Red light. Security office? Red light. Every time I swiped it, a beep, a flash of red. And then, that awful, definitive denial. The turnstile beeped as I approached, but the red light flashed again. Denied. The security guard, the same one who had hesitated when I first arrived, stood behind the desk, looking uneasy. His eyes shifted from the tablet to me and back again. "Mr. Davis?" he said softly. "Your access is temporary. It's been revoked." I wasn't surprised. I knew exactly who was behind it. Hector. I didn't even flinch. I stayed calm, kept my voice steady. "Who authorized it?" Quote. The guard swallowed. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He said it was for an investigation, a temporary restriction." I nodded once, my jaw tightening. "Call Mr. Vance. Tell him I'm standing here." The guard hesitated, but I knew Hector wouldn't let him back out. He dialed the number and spoke in hushed tones. A minute later, Hector appeared behind the glass door, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a smug smile on his face. "Stephen," he greeted me, loud enough for the guard to hear, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Luke, my meeting invite." I didn't blink. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I stood there, staring him down with a calmness that felt like the eye of a storm. "Oh, that's my mistake," Hector said with a mock apology. "I removed you. Executive meetings are sensitive. I'm head of corporate security. I said you're probationary." He let the words hang in the air, enjoying the power. "And you were late to your interview. Try to remember your place." My place? My jaw clenched, but I didn't let the anger show. I knew Hector was trying to bait me. He wanted me to snap, to show weakness. But I wasn't going to give him that. I was done playing his game. "I'll remember," I said, my voice cool. Hector's smile was tight, like he didn't like being confronted, but he didn't show it. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with nothing but a closed door in front of me. I walked back to my office, my steps measured, keeping my composure intact. Hector had made his move, but it wasn't over. It wouldn't be over until I got what I needed. That evening, when the office had emptied out and the noise died down, I sat at my desk and pulled up the data. I had everything I needed. Hector had been sloppy. His games were getting predictable. I started piecing everything together: entry points, logs, timestamps. He thought he had control, but he had underestimated me. I wasn't here to play by his rules. I was here to expose him. I didn't need to rush. The police were already waiting in the lobby, and Hector didn't know it yet, but I had evidence he couldn't deny. Hector was running out of time. The next morning, I walked into the office with a calm certainty. I knew the security systems like the back of my hand now, where they were weak, where they were strong. I wasn't going to let Hector walk all over me anymore. As I walked into the lobby, the same guard looked at me, eyes wide with uncertainty. "Mr. Davis," he said quietly, "the board wants to speak with you. It's urgent." I didn't answer. I just walked past him, straight to the executive floor. When I reached the elevator, I didn't wait for anyone to tell me what to do. I swiped my badge once more. This time, the light turned green. The doors slid open. The silence on the executive floor was suffocating. It smelled like citrus polish and power. It was a quiet, calculated kind of fear. The doors to boardroom A were closed, but I could hear Hector's voice from inside, his usual smooth, predatory tone. "We have to consider whether the CEO is compromised," he was saying. "Whether her judgment is influenced." I stepped closer, my heart beat steady, my mind laser-focused. I was done letting Hector win. I pushed open the door. The moment I walked in, Hector's eyes locked on me, that smug look on his face. Well, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Security has arrived." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. He wanted to paint me as a problem in front of the entire room, but I wasn't the one who had a problem. Liliana didn't flinch. She didn't even acknowledge Hector's jab. Her eyes were on me, calm, calculating. She wasn't rattled by Hector's theatrics. She'd seen it all before. "Stephen," she said, her voice as cool and controlled as ever, "you're not authorized on this floor." I didn't respond to her. I looked straight at Hector. "My badge was disabled, Hector, by you, 10 minutes ago." Hector tried to smooth it over, but I wasn't going to let him. "I'm documenting this," I said, my voice calm, even, and without hesitation. I slid a folder onto the table with a soft, deliberate thud. "Mr. Vance claims there is impropriety between me and the CEO. He's using a cropped clip from a highway accident to imply that I'm compromised. But I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to expose you." Hector's eyes flickered, his smile slipping slightly. He was caught off guard, and it felt good. The room went silent as I began pulling out pages from the folder. Printed logs, timestamps, the whole mess. Every move Hector made, every attempt to smear Liliana and drag me into his web, laid bare. "This is what you're hiding, Hector," I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You thought you could control the narrative, but you're not the only one who can manipulate the truth." His smile faltered as I slid one last page across the table, a police report, evidence of his involvement in everything, from the footage to the missing data. He had no way out. The board members shifted, uncomfortable. Hector's face twisted in a mix of anger and disbelief. He stood up quickly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is doctored!" he shouted, his voice rising. I didn't flinch. "You want to call it a witch hunt, Hector? Fine, but we'll let law enforcement decide." Liliana stood up, her presence commanding the room. Her eyes met mine for just a moment, an unspoken understanding passing between us. Then she turned back to the board. "Vote," she said, her voice sharp and final. The room moved quickly. Hector's reign was over. By the time I walked out of that room, Hector's face was already gone from the leadership wall. His name erased. By 6 p.m., the office was quiet. It was the kind of quiet that came after a battle had been fought and won. A soft, eerie calm that settled in like the silence after a storm. The phone didn't ring. The lights buzzed faintly, but otherwise, it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. I sat in my closet office, packing a box. Not because I was fired. No, men like me don't assume we're invited to stay after we light a match in a room full of gasoline. My probation was over, but I had gone rogue. I had exposed Hector, brought in the police, and dismantled his carefully crafted story. That sort of thing makes boards nervous. A soft knock came at the doorframe. I looked up, and there she was, Liliana. Her blazer was off now, sleeves rolled once, her white blouse still crisp, hair down and slightly disheveled. No entourage, no assistant. Just her. "What are you doing?" she asked, leaning casually against the file cabinet. "Clearing out," I replied, not looking up. "Figured you'd want a safer pair of hands." Liliana walked in without another word, her gaze steady. She leaned against my file cabinet like she owned even my exit. "Safe?" she repeated. "Is that what you think today was?" I lifted my eyes to meet hers. There was no softness in her look, no sympathy, just a sharp, controlled edge. "I think you'll have pressure from the board," I said, knowing what was coming. "They'll want to distance the company from all this disruption." Liliana didn't look bothered by it. In fact, she almost seemed relieved, her lips curving into a small smile. "Disruption is what saved us," she said, voice steady. "You may not have realized it, but today you were part of that." I didn't speak. We both knew it was true. She stepped closer to my desk, setting a small paper bag on it. "Thai takeout," she said, her voice a little lighter now, almost playful. "I didn't eat lunch. And you look like you forgot your body exists." I stared at the bag for a moment, unsure if this was some kind of gesture, but when she slid a container toward me without asking, I opened it. "Patty, extra egg!" My stomach grumbled at the familiar smell. "How did you know?" I asked, taking a bite without thinking. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her own container and, without looking up, reached over with her fork. She moved a small pile of cilantro from her box into mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world, as though she'd already decided what belonged where. I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything. I just ate, my eyes still focused on the spreadsheet we had been going over earlier. There was no need for words between us now. She knew what I was doing. I knew what she wanted me to do. When Hector's name came up on the screen, I glanced up briefly, meeting her eyes. She didn't need to ask what the number meant. She didn't need to check if I had it under control. We just exchanged a look, a brief, silent understanding. Then she turned back to the work, her focus unshaken. That was how it started, not with a confession, not with a grand gesture, just two people sitting in a room, working together, understanding without needing to explain. Later, after the last bite of takeout had been eaten and the rain outside had shifted to a gentle mist, Liliana stood. She moved toward the trash can to throw away the containers, but her ankle seemed to give her trouble as she shifted her weight carefully. Before she could steady herself, I was on my feet. I didn't touch her like she was fragile. I didn't need to. I just put my hand at her lower back, steadying her as she moved around the coffee table. She paused for a moment under my hand. I didn't let go. Her fingers curled around my wrist in a soft, deliberate motion. Not tight. just enough to let me know she had chosen to be there, chosen to make the next move. "You don't have to," she said, her voice low, almost questioning. "I know," I replied, my voice just as steady as hers. I hadn't moved. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but I wasn't going to back off either. Her gaze lifted to mine, her eyes dark, intense. "Stay," she said, her voice not pleading, but resolute. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. I held her gaze, trying to figure out what exactly I felt. "If I stay," I said quietly, "it's because you want me here, not because you need saving." Her lips curved, a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Stephen," she said, her voice steady, "I don't keep anything I don't want." That hit harder than anything I could have imagined. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a game. This was real. I stepped closer, but only slowly, careful not to push her away. She didn't stop me. Her hand slid from my wrist to the front of my shirt, palm flat against my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart. "You came back into this building after a crash," I whispered, "and you walked into a room full of sharks on a wrapped ankle." Her chin lifted, and her eyes never left mine. "And you walked into my boardroom with paper evidence and the police waiting in the lobby," she said. "Tell me, what kind of man does that?" I could feel the air between us tightening, like something was finally clicking into place. "The kind who doesn't leave people on the shoulder," I said quietly. She didn't say anything else. Instead, she stepped forward, her fingers grazing my jaw, her thumb gently pressing under my cheekbone. I leaned into her touch, the world narrowing to just her and the soft hum of the servers in the background. When I kissed her, it wasn't a collision. It wasn't hurried or chaotic. It was slow, deliberate, like we were both finally allowing ourselves to feel what had been building up all along. Her fingers gripped the back of my neck, pulling me closer, matching my pressure like she was signing the same contract in ink. When we broke the kiss, I looked at her. Her eyes were glossy, not from tears, but from intensity. "Is this a mistake?" I asked softly. She shook her head, once, decisive. "No." "Good," I said, then kissed her again. This time, she smiled into the kiss, her lips curving in a way that told me she had already won something that mattered. The headlines came the next day, like the ripple of a stone tossed into water. Ross Logistics CFO arrested in data leak scandal. Hector's name vanished from internal emails. His photo was removed from the leadership wall before lunch. Liliana didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She worked. So did I. We rebuilt the security perimeter. We audited credentials. We rotated keys. We changed processes until the company felt like it could breathe again. But for once, I wasn't alone in the fight. And that made all the difference. A week later, I stood in Liliana's office, looking out at the city through the wide windows. The storm smell had faded, and sunlight sliced through the room in pale gold streaks. The quiet hum of the office was still there, but everything felt different now. Everything had shifted. On her desk, a folder sat open, my name on it. The words were simple: employment contract, permanent position. And when I opened it, there was a new title next to my name, a larger authority, and a line at the bottom for me to sign. No games, no leverage, no hidden conditions, just a clean offer. Liliana leaned back in her chair, eyes watching me carefully, like she was waiting for something, waiting to see if I would take the bait. I had no intention of playing games. I glanced at the paper again, my mind racing for just a moment. Then I set it down, the decision made. "It's clean," I said, my voice steady. "I'll sign." Liliana didn't smile. She didn't gloat. But there was something in her eyes, like she was watching me decide whether to accept a crown, one I hadn't expected, but now couldn't turn away from. "You're still here," she said, her voice softer, as if the weight of everything had lifted just a little. "I told you I would be," I replied. My voice was the same as always, but this time there was something more beneath the words. The certainty. Liliana's gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, just for a moment, but I felt it. The shift, the recognition that something had changed between us in the space we had made together. "Do you know what I want?" she asked, her voice low, sharp with intent. I didn't move. I didn't speak right away. But I understood her. I always had. "Say it," I said. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak yet. She was still deciding something. Then, without another word, she reached for my tie and tugged me forward, her movement confident, controlled. When our lips met again, it was slow. Not in a hallway, not in a rushed moment of pressure. It was deliberate. It was us, standing in the midst of everything we had fought for, without anyone to interfere, without anyone to try to pull us apart. When we broke the kiss, she rested her forehead lightly against my chest, just for a second, a reset, a private moment. Then she stepped back, eyes sharp again, like we were both back in the real world. "Home," she said, her voice steady, decisive. "Your place or mine?" I asked, my voice a little playful now, knowing what we had just shared. "Ours," she replied, her voice firm, just as it had always been, same as before. And this time she took my hand. She didn't let go, not even when we walked out together through the glass lobby where everyone could see us. We weren't hiding anymore. We walked side by side, not because we needed approval, but because neither of us had to hide, not from each other, not from the world. Some people think strength is staying untouched, staying above it all. I don't. Strength is getting hit, staying upright, and having one person beside you who doesn't flinch when the world turns sharp. If you've ever held it together alone, I hope you find your protector.